It's been a long time coming, but here we are. Despite many reasons to believe the series is dead, we are now witnessing the full release of a brand new Tokyo Xtreme Racer. Teased just over a year ago and released as an early access back in January of 2025. Several months of playtesting and feedback. Will this release live up to the immense build-up leading to its full release? But first, a bit of history for the uninitiated. Tokyo Xtreme Racer, or if we go by its real name, Tokyo Racer, is a Japanese racing game franchise owned and handled by the company Genki. They've been around since the 90s, and Tokyo Racer has effectively been their breadwinner series ever since the year 94. Their own niche in a sense, so they kept evolving the series for years to come, and even made a couple of funky spin-offs to change things up a bit. And these games were simple enough to have a relatively low cost of development compared to other racing games of the era. So they were successful, just not wildly successful, as each title was bombarded by middling to low reviews by outlets at the time, with modest sales numbers. Their biggest fumble, unfortunately, was with the last mainline title, Tokyo Racer X. Not because the game has gone bad, but rather with factors surrounding the game. A problem with the Western naming rights of Tokyo Xtreme Racer caused them to pivot and make a completely new name, causing a ton of people to not realize this was part of the TXR series in the first place, and the decision to switch from PlayStation in favor of the Xbox 360. This resulted in the abysmal sales that sent the whole series and Genki to very low points. They were bought out by a pachinko developer and tried to make several attempts to cash in on the mobile market with two spin-offs that inevitably failed. Until a couple of years ago, with the progression of social media and emulation, the newer generation of gamers and racing game enthusiasts have managed to find ways to appreciate the series and its many obscure details in many ways. Even if we're arguably decades late to the party, it seems like this buzz has given enough noise to cause some sort of revival. And with the rise of indie and AA markets again, they're taking their chance with this one. In 2024, a teaser of a new Tokyo Xtreme Racer finally went out and sent the racing community in a blaze. Everyone was hyped, but also a bit cautious, followed by a very smart move. They seem to know most people who love their old games did it through emulation. So TXR 2025 was announced to launch as an early access game exclusively on PC via Steam. Through this early access period, we've only gotten access to around 30 to 40% of the game's full content, mainly rivals and cars being limited, while mostly taking feedback from the community. Some of the major changes from this period will be mentioned later, so for now, it's time to dig into the game from the beginning. True to its name, the core mechanics of Tokyo Xtreme Racer play out like their old mainline titles, almost an extremely similarity. There are a few new additions to make things stand out a bit, but overall, you play the game by racing through the highway roads of Tokyo, from the C1 loop to the famous Wangan speed line, challenging every single rival that stands in your way to complete domination. It's deceptively simple since the mention of highways tends to let people think most of the races just devolve into a flat-out drag race. However, certain parts of the highways are far more reliant on a good balance of speed and handling control. A couple of rivals will also prove to be extremely challenging prospects that you'll want to learn how to drive and adapt as best as possible, or by reading through the rival bios if you like to dig for a lot of lore information. TXR is not exactly a story-heavy racing game. Pretty much all of them puts you in the seat of a newcomer immediately, with the option to buy a star car and start wrecking through the scene until everyone is defeated. There's usually not gonna be any highly detailed cutscene featuring character models. Most of the ones encountered here are very simple cutscenes with stills and lore bits written like poems. To get you started, the selection of starter cars covers three options between a modern Suzuki Swift, MX-5, and a classic AE86. There's a bit of a hand-holding approach for the tutorial. You simply pick a place to spawn in the map, chase the rival, and flash them to start a race. The mechanic here is pretty much similar to every Tokyo Xtreme Racer. Both drivers have an SP bar at the top. Whoever loses all their SP first loses. This can be done by hitting walls, traffic, or the rivals, but the most reliable source is often by simply being left in the dust. The further you are, the faster the SP gauge depletes. No. The handling is very simple and arcadey, but there are a bunch of factors that make driving these highway roads way deeper than what's expected. Easy to pick up and play. This game also runs on Unreal Engine 5.
Oh no.
that has been under fire with so many games having performance issues, but it seems Genki has managed to keep the game running well. I'd recommend checking out this video by Digital Foundry about the game's overall performance and optimization. So far though, the game is running exceptionally well, so that is a pretty big win for the team. Now back to the original topic. For each win you get cash, and a secondary currency called BP. We'll get to that in a moment. A short dialogue with a recurring character to really hook in old fans and get some of the newcomers excited for future encounters. Then simply go back to the garage and start purchasing upgrades, new cars, or the skill trees with nightly earnings. And that is pretty much the overall loop of the game. Just focus on beating rivals and cruise in the objective list to spawn in bosses, which in turn lets you open up portions of the skill tree. The biggest departure from the series by far, overhauling the standard method of unlocking content and features. On one hand, it gives players complete freedom to choose what to unlock as they progress. Like maybe you want to unlock cars from specific brands either for loyalty or a self-imposed challenge. It also provides a bit more depth with the introduction of passive and installed skills that can really help you in races, making you deal more SP damage, take less in response, higher total SP, or extending the distance it'll take to start taking damage. It's a really cool system if you dig deep enough, as it can reinforce a bunch of different playstyles, but I can also understand why people just groan upon seeing this page. It can be pretty daunting to be given a full page of things to unlock using resources, especially when it dictates how good or bad the economy can feel, and how many cars you can even make purchasable. Luckily, Genki took advantage of the early access period to take in some criticism. Among them is the way skill tree is implemented. Previously, you were only given a BP for every named rival you've been for the first time, plus the selections were a lot limited and sorted in a weird way. The system has been reworked to have way more options for skills, resulting in even more benefits for more playstyles. The vehicle section has been sorted to also inform of each car's performance scaling, while old skills affecting the economy like long run bonuses are now just unlocked from the very start. Default maximum wallet has been buffed significantly to not hold back players from being able to purchase the more expensive cars, but the biggest change overall is the ability to earn BP from defeated rivals, effectively removing the hard cap that was previously there for skill tree progression, scaling up based on the levels to encourage actually going after tougher opponents on repeat. And if after all that you still prefer to not have any of that nonsense in your game, you can just start the game in casual or enjoy mode, which removes any limitations from the skill tree, or if you have a leftover save file from the early access, simply press the button give up. Other big improvements cover the increased support for different steering wheel models. It does work well with some cheaper models, although you'll have to manually set up the configurations in the menu first. It's a pretty good alternative to experience something like Wangan Midnight's arcade cabinets from the comfort of your home. A photo mode that was absent at the very start has also been added with a modest amount of tools to play around. A highlight during road selection to show where the rival is going to avoid a forced draw. Fans of the old games had also requested a missing feature from the previous games, engine temperature management. The implementation here is pretty cool as it became a toggled feature, buffing up income rate in exchange of having the risk of losing top speed and acceleration when pushing the car for too long. This can be combated by simply driving at cruising speed or going into parking spots. This inclusion also brought in better HUD information, now adding the player input monitor and a direct confirmation when being in slipstream. They did cause a bit of an issue when they added a sound alert for upshifting, but that was fixed very shortly after. All of the improvements and fixes here should make the experience for the full release significantly better, especially now that the overall balancing seems to be dialed up to quite challenging. The earliest point of the game only features 3 crews running around, with only the C1 loop available. This is the simplest part of the game, with very limited car selection, upgrade parts, and skills available from the skill tree, perfectly mirrored by the rival crews being mostly pushovers. You'll unlock other spawn points and build up cash naturally, while racing these tutorial rivals, and get a feel of the recurring mechanics surrounding crews, like how after beating all crew members the leader will pop out to challenge you personally, and for beating them the game instantly ends the day by throwing you into the parking lot, giving some more context regarding the situation of the highway street racing scene, what's been happening in the last couple of years, and giving some personality to the crew members beyond their bio page, unveiling the follow-up chapter which usually features a stage boss. These guys are the real milestone, and they're significantly more challenging than the usual rivals you'll face. But now with the second half of Stage 1, the entire map is unveiled and we're now no longer shackled in the confines of the C1 loop, unlocking other areas like the famous Wangan Speedline, Ariake, Yokohane, and etc. Due to the immense amount of areas and rivals here, a lot of the game's existing mechanics start to become important enough to warrant your attention. Like for example, the tire selection, being a simple choice between soft, medium, or hard tires, chosen before leaving to race for the night. The choices affect things like grip, acceleration, and tire durability. Of course, unlocking the spawn zones will also require you to drive past them first, just like before, which gives the opportunity to explore the areas outside of the C1 loop naturally, as you race against the waves of new rival crews. But they're not the only ones prowling the streets from this stage onwards, as we get introduced to the elusive Wanderers. A staple of the franchise being street racers with no crew affiliation, making them solo racers, but every single one of them will have specific criteria to meet first before they will accept your advances. And just like crew leaders and bosses, they're guaranteed to have skills installed to make their races extra spicy. As per tradition, the criteria are pretty much as bizarre as you can get in these games, but luckily this time around, there's actually way more sources of information to really figure out what triggers them. No need to randomly guess or ask for online help about it this time, like a headless chicken honking their car at 3 AM on the highway. Simply look around the parking area to take a bit of a breather. Here you can mainly find rivals and wanderers that wouldn't be roaming around the map to challenge. Refresh tires and nitrous at a cost. Meet up with the legendary tuner for a random temporary buff for the rest of the night, or simply talk with the nameless NPCs or rivals standing around. They're usually there to just provide some characterization or world building in a sense. With the immense amount of diversity to rival personalities, it's rather hard to not see them as charming in some way, shape, or form. They always have some entertaining stories to tell, whether it's about their own personal stories, other famous rivals, or sometimes about you, signalizing your rise to fame or infamy in the street racing scene. But they'll also give out information regarding wanderers and their hidden criterias. In the case you may have forgotten about this info, you can always check the rival page to replay conversations with them, along with checking the details of their skills. The parking areas are also a great place to take a rest for a while. Take a picture of the fleet of tuned cars parked in the area. With the amount of rivals from this point onwards, you'll likely notice a lot of the rivals behave very differently from one another. Some of them will drive oblivious to your position, try to heat up their tires at the start of the race, some will try to actively block you from passing them, and some may even decide pushing you into a traffic is a fair strategy. I do think there are way more opponents that will just ram you backside and make you spin out, or force you into traffic since this edition, so maybe they could tone that down a bit. Either way, it's all something to learn and deal with the insane amount of rivals to beat here, before finally finishing it off with the bosses. With the whole map unlocked, rivals are scattered apart from one another. It can be a bit full just driving to the next one. Fortunately, Genki thought of a really cool and funny way to occupy your time. The term "everyone is a racer" truly fits the description of this game. Every single person on the road, no matter their occupation, economic situation, or mental conditions, are racers at heart. I guess this also explains why cops are not around to stop the street racing scene. They're probably racing someplace else too. Another note to pay attention is with Genki's attempt to cover 3 different eras of Tokyo Xtreme Racer via the objectives, covering the Legend, Bastards, and New Generation arcs. Legends, as the name suggests, covers the old characters from as early as the birth of the series, hence the first boss in this section being Rolling Master, followed up by members of the 13 Devils. Bastards covers the Phantom 9 crew, the main antagonist from the last mainline game, and New Generation follows the story of newcomers to the scene, like Eternal Polaris, who has risen up the ranks rapidly just like us. It's a cool way to hit multiple angles to the story of this game, giving veterans some blasts from the past with the return of the 13 Devils, tying up loose ends that were left from Importuner Challenge, while building up new characters to sort of carry the torch of the series, mostly having retcons to the timeline based from the mentions of events happening in Importuner Challenge, taking place 4 years ago, which would put it in 2021, despite originally being in 2006, effectively moving the whole series up by about 15 years or so.
But that's just a theory.
It does fit the idea of this title being a reboot, considering the story is written and designed in a way to accommodate completely new fans of the series with no exposure to the lore beforehand, while giving old fans a lot of things to chew on. There's one comment I'd like to make regarding the rebalancing so far. With the addition of skills and the new AI behavior, the difficulty has certainly gone up, but there's one thing that stands out at the very end of Stage 1, nitrous. Well, at this point, we don't have access to it yet, but the rivals don't seem to play by the same rules, as crew leaders and bosses seem to already have them. In some cases, this works as a great equalizer, since the AI can't handle corners well, but in the case of one boss, it became real.
Bye, have a great time.
There are two ways to deal with this problem. Either challenge him near the Daikoku PA and make use of the corners, or go back to the C1 loop, beat Treacherous Jackknife and Bloodhound first to unlock more performance upgrades. This is mainly to highlight how challenging rivals in this game can be tackled, but there's usually a way to deal with them. Sometimes you just gotta prioritize other targets first to make things easier. But if your car is still struggling to catch up, it may be time to consider investing into different cars, as the starter cars may start to feel very limited even with some fine-tuning. Just like everything else, they are unlockable through the skill tree system, and unfortunately forces you to unlock a chain of cars first, which may end up costing a lot of BP. Like if you're planning to unlock the Cappuccino, you need to unlock the 2 cars above it first. Ideally, this would be a good system to unlock cars based on their performance tiers, but if you're specifically looking for cars under a manufacturer branch, it ends up being a tad annoying. There are cars you can acquire without any of the skill tree stuff, from the bosses and wanderers, but those cars are not tunable. Since you also get their preset liveries attached, they can be a pretty good short-term investment until the next boss proves to be too much of a challenge. Otherwise, you'll have to earn the rights to acquire and upgrade the regular car rosters. They're not going to give you a fleet of supercars just for finishing a few races. It's a breath of fresh air from most racing games that come out today, and it really brought back the attachment to your cars. They'll carry you throughout your journey from the bottom to the top. It's something I've sorely missed from the old age of racing games. Every car build feels personal in some way, so it definitely helps to have a ton of selection to cover most of the niche in the Japanese market. So no Western cars are available here, unfortunately, despite the appearance of Ford, Lotus, and RUF back in TXR3. But then again, Genki is currently rebuilding their momentum, so I think the lack of Western selection is excusable. So instead, we have brands like Subaru, Mazda, Daihatsu, Suzuki, Mitsubishi, and Toyotas. The full release also brought in way more cars than before, with new brands like Honda, which previously only appeared in the Drift spin-offs, but also the appearance of Lexus and even the magnificent LFA. When it comes to the tuning, it can be a bit simplistic. Performance tuning covering a level-based upgrade unlocked from the skill tree, so you can prioritize specific upgrades over others here. The cost of these upgrades also feels pretty balanced. You'll earn enough cash at the same rate you'll earn BP to unlock them in the first place. Specific tuning parts are usually locked based on the stage objectives, so you can always strategize and choose which to go after first. Purchasing them opens up the ability to set up custom tuning for personal preference, or if you want to squeeze every single bit of performance out of them. It may not be as in-depth as the usual sim or simcades, but for an arcade racer, this option is surprisingly deep enough as it is. There are some very minor details missing, like the usual graph or transmission tuning, but I'd say the current setup of just showing the speed and numbers is fine too. And of course, you can tune the wheels to fit some of the insane looking drift tuned cars out there. If all else fails, then the option of the engine swap is available at the very modest pricing of 3000 BP. I think this is currently the biggest misstep Genki has pulled with this game, because asking this many BPs even after the reworked earnings is a bit counterintuitive to what the mechanic was mainly used for previously. In the past, engine swaps have mainly been used as a way to really make underpowered cars be viable again from mid to end game. It gives your funny little K cars a chance at beating the average supercars in fair conditions, at the cost of handling. The way it was earned by simply reaching a pretty high amount of mileage driven in total, which while still pretty steep, at least means it heavily functions as a way to help players that are completely stuck. For example, imagine you keep challenging this one boss that is so absurdly fast that there's no way to really win unless you get super lucky with traffic. As you keep challenging them over and over and over, the mileage builds up and eventually the engine swap feature is available. By locking them behind a massive amount of BP costs like this, it made it so that you just have to farm rivals you know you can beat, which either means you have to beat 100 rivals at the highest level from the first win rewards, or bully one rival with the highest levels for around 500 races. It's just insane, and I think they still need to work this out in the oven. As it stands, this mechanic is not working out quite as well as it's intended. Visually, this game has pretty limited options, but they're mostly well done. Usually each car will have 3 options of bumpers, hoods, and spoilers each, either based on actual tuning brands or originally made by Genki's Racing Project design team. Not gonna lie though, these original designs feel very tasteful. They don't go really over the top like with body parts you'd see in some recent Need for Speed games, They're just right enough where it stands, and Genki really knew their stuff with this. As for the livery editor, luckily we don't really deal with a preset selection like in the drift spin-offs or the dreaded manual painter from TXR3. It's a lot more streamlined this time around, following the ilk of many other racing games currently, so it shouldn't feel too unfamiliar if you've made liveries in recent racing games. Despite this, the options and tools available are still a bit outdated by comparison. We can't even freely paint rims to recreate some of the looks from rivals. Despite the modest amount of body kit modifications, the variety of neon kit is insane. Just look at all these different setups. They even have customization for brake discs and calipers for some reason. In stage 2, it's mostly the same deal of having to deal with 3 new objectives, rival crews to deal with alongside new wanderers, and bosses that await. Because the map hasn't changed, this stage can be done faster by heavily relying on fast travel. However, as a way to amp up the challenge, stage 2 is designed to have way more unusual types of races beyond the 1v1 battles. We've run into these before with the multi-rival races and back-to-back duels, but this time they're very common to find, and opponents are a lot more challenging thanks to skills being more prominent. Multi-rival races, while looking epic and really cool, are a bit shaky as they're heavily dependent on the rival's individual performance. They can be equally challenging and make the races super intense, or end up with a couple of dead weights taking the race back to your standard 1v1 affair. The back-to-back races are way more consistent since you're just racing multiple rivals in a row. The only catch here is that your SP bar carries over, so you'll want to race carefully and avoid losing too much SP on the first couple of opponents. The balance was a lot more questionable during its early access period, with the most infamous being Melancholic Angel. It was so bad that they had to nerf her, but the way it was done is pretty interesting. On a first clear, you'll face against the nerfed version, letting players at least progress in the story. On repeat challenges, however, the original version of Melancholic Angel will appear instead, now with a higher level and a brand new boss aura enveloping her car. This way, the sold overtuned version of the boss car can remain lore accurate, while giving players a solution to the progress bottleneck. As for Midnight Cinderella, she's actually pretty balanced. She's fast, but not to an unbelievable extent, having weaknesses that can be easily exploited around corners. Stage 1 and 2 is arguably where the game is at its most balanced, and it's not surprising as these were the 2 stages available during the early access periods. People played the game and discovered enough issues for them to be sorted out during early access and with the 1.0 update. Since you've now beaten Midnight Cinderella, you can now apply boss aura effects with the livery page assuming the perk is unlocked. This is but a taste of more customization features that awaits us, as later bosses and wanderers start to arrive in their own style. For the rest of the game, this is going to be uncharted territory, completely new content for everyone to experience for the first time ever. Due to the addition of Honda and Lexus, it is pretty funny seeing crews with those cars pop out of nowhere. It is, however, very obvious just how high the difficulty spike comes in, as opponents start rolling in with endgame supercars like the new Honda NSX, Skyline R35, and Fairlady 400Z. Most of them having the anti-wall damage skills also made sure their wall running escapades are rewarded heavily. Nitrous becomes mandatory at the start of every race just to avoid losing instantly in the first few seconds. And the worst thing of them all, the increased rate of defensive AI behavior. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, this stage is the hardest part of the game. I'm guessing there's some awkward stat parameters happening in the stage, or the team decided to blow their load early to show off the new cars and AI behaviors for players that never did a reset from their early access save file. The result is a very awkward crapshoot in most races, as Nitrous and the temporary night buff become far too important to miss. It certainly doesn't help when you're dealing with triple bosses with 2 of them fighting to be the next Minister of Defense as the other guy runs off and kills you, or when they start pulling nasty tricks just to blind you into a crash. On the other hand, stage 3 is where the story seems to really ramp up into high gear. Parking lot bystanders will start to talk about your presence, as fame or infamy follows in the wake of every rival and boss you've crushed. Revelations of certain character relationships, the moves made by powerful figures eventually lead to climax of Eternal Polaris and a very dubious interaction with a new crew in town, all leading up to the penultimate arc in stage 4. There's less enemies here, but that doesn't mean the game has no surprises waiting to happen. Although one thing to note about this chapter, it's way easier than the last. Only a few rivals actually use supercars, and the majority switch back to lower end rides. While most of the AI this time avoids getting into collisions, it's really bizarre, as if stage 3 and 4 had their difficulty switched during development and no one noticed. At least for the regular crew rivals, this seems to be the case. As for the bosses and wanderers, we're starting to see more intense challenges and varied boss aura enter the highway scene. White Charisma, one of the fastest rivals in previous TXR, enters the scene as a wanderer. Speed King, or rather Swift Emperor as he's known now, had his former former mentor Purple Comet or Namahage working under Phantom 9 leader Snake Eyes to end the threat to his reign, that being you. A revisit from Skull Bullet and his gang from Importuno Challenge as he tries to recruit you for his rather capitalist take on street racing. The return of our favorite Gundam loving boss, and yes, you can buy this car as per usual, and the longest boss chain in the whole game, and 7 rival boss battles against every single boss from the new generation arcs, mixing both back-to-back and multi-rival battles. This is possibly the most intense race in the whole game alone, especially if you started from the Wangan entrance, even though the game paints it as a race for fun scenario. But it's obvious what Genki is pushing here, trying to make every single one of these bosses have chemistry together in order to build up the next fastest crew in the Shotoko highways to replace the 13 devils, all centered around Eternal Polaris, culminating in the final stage with only 3 crews running the streets. It may sound easy and short, but these guys roll with some of the fastest cars in the highway, and they only spawn around the Wangan and Yokohane area, turning most of this chapter into a drag race gauntlets on high-speed straights against a bunch of supercars. Those max tier upgrades help a lot in this stage. It's unbelievable just how grippy the car is even at 200 kilometers an hour. In fact, you can reach the pinnacle of 450 kilometers an hour in the Wangan section from this point on. Despite being the shortest, the boss races make up for it by having several chances at the big guns. This time we race against Snake Eyes, Swift Emperor, and Eternal Polaris twice each. For story context, how it's set up is a bit weird. Like apparently the first time we raced the Emperor, he's not in his maximum form since he mainly rules the Wangan area instead of the C1 loop. And for Eternal Polaris, she didn't like how her friends decided to gang up on us the first time around, so she went and asked for a more personal duel with a romantic proposal attached. While Snake Eyes keeps yapping about how he's the one who will defeat the Emperor over and over and over again. The second race does highlight a bit of AI trickery. Assuming you have a max-tuned supercar, it's unlikely you'll see this, but it highlights just how the AI cheats to catch up from corners. Holy fuck. We get a bit of reveal that these two guys aren't exactly the same Emperor or Snake Eyes we've seen from the previous games. It does explain why this Emperor decided to drive an NSX instead of the Skyline, and Eternal Polaris moves on to finally stop being a loner by building her own team. But the story isn't over yet, with yet another plot twist. I'm not going to reveal this one, but let's just say this dude's car is very cool. It is a Genki game. It would be more surprising if there's only 1 credit in the endgame section. You do get the option to start a new game plus from this point, resetting all rival states,
I'm in danger!
refunding all spent BPs for the skill trees, while letting you keep all cars and cash currently on hand. It's a neat option if you want a faster BP grind to unlock engine swaps for the post-endgame section. The goal in this section is to beat every single rival, including Wanderers. It's a good excuse to finally go after Wanderers you've ignored throughout the campaign, and you get some decent rewards for it. Some Wanderer cars being purchasable, and some special tuned cars with preset body kits. There's technically only 1 true boss in this stage, but considering there are a couple of these level 29-30 Wanderers running around, you're going to be fighting against actual demons, featuring the real Jintei, Snake Eyes, and direct references of past games, Phantoms of TXR0, TXR3, and Importuno Challenge, all here in their absolute bullshittery. If you manage to beat every single Wanderer, every single crew, the reward is a showdown against a certain devil. Then, and only then, will you achieve the true ending, achieving the goal of being the fastest man alive on a throne built by speed. I really like this game. It is an exceptional return to form for Genki after what seems to be almost 2 decades long of absence. They managed to stay true to the formula that was set by past titles and somehow keeps a lot of the traditions alive and well. The simplest way I could probably describe this game is that it feels like a PS2 era title but with graphics from the future. But being such also means the game has its own fair share of issues. The first big thing I'd like to bring up is the lack of multiple save files. This may not seem like a problem for some. It gets annoying that we have to manually back up our saves every time you want to test something without losing your current save file. And speaking of the skill tree, since this is technically the first attempt to implement the system into the series, I'd say they did a pretty okay job with how it's implemented here, but I think it could be done better. Despite having been revamped twice now, the BP acquisition rate is still a problem in mid-end game, resulting in certain abilities losing a lot of value because of how the game plays out later on, with some becoming outright obsolete due to their niche requirements. In the end, everyone gets funneled into into the meta of general skills that just works all the time at maximum capabilities. In some cases, however, where these niche abilities are useful, they can be very helpful, which is why I think having them around as an option is great, but not at the cost of BP they're asking for. The only way I can see this working is if maybe some of the options in the tree are refundable, and it lets people experiment with different setups without locking them into save scumming. Cars and cash perks can stay permanent, since I don't think cash is a big problem, unless you specifically want to buy every single boss car in the game. I can see the way it's intended is for players to go through New Game Plus in order to unlock all the tools you need, but I think it can still be way better designed. Just like the AI behavior, which on one hand gives the unique experience of racing against different personalities, ends up becoming really annoying after a couple of interactions. The problem here seems to stem from some AI being way too reactive, like they'd immediately ram you the moment they spot you next to them, rather than when you're approaching. And as much as I found the level of 29-30 bosses to be amusing at first, it becomes really lame after figuring these encounters are more of a test of patience and luck than anything else. Why bother with clean cornering or braking when the AI can turn past tight corners at maximum speed? Just keep wall riding and pray they make a mistake so you can finally win. Just be sure you don't end up under a traffic car mid-race. It's just not fun in the long run, but I guess there's always New Game Plus available to avoid meeting these opponents. All in all, I still think this game is a good revival of the series. The choices made surrounding the game's early access release and choice of platform is a smart move from Genki, and for better or worse, their accuracy to how old games were designed attracted both old and newcomers to the series, giving us a glimpse of what the team is capable of to mix classic design choices with new ones to spice things up a lot. The writing remains as stellar as they were with the goofy antics of all the rivals, while having the serious melodramatic tones for a good balance. And for the racing, I mean, it's basically the average Tokyo Xtreme Racer. The handling feels good enough to fit with the overall game, even at way higher speeds. So yeah, I would absolutely recommend this game for any of you JDM fans, Wangan Midnight fans, and those of you who are simply into arcade racers with a bit of depth from progression. And I hope Genki keeps improving on this game with future updates, at least enough to patch out its wrinkles. Hopefully this game will be successful enough to spawn more games in the future. Just think of the possibilities of a new Kaido battle or TXR drift. Hell, they could probably even destroy Gran Turismo or Forza Motorsport if they ever decided to make another game like RBC1GP. But for now, we'll just have to wait and see. Have you played the game? What are your thoughts on the full release and glorious return of Genki? Comment down below and I'll see you in the next video.